Hello everyone and welcome to another weather update. Tonight we'll be talking about the severe weather again over the next couple of days, but first let's start off with today's Storm Prediction Center's outlook for the 30th of April. And so as of right now, as the 1630 Z update, we do have an enhanced risk from central Iowa all the way down into about northeastern Kansas there, and then into northwestern Missouri as well. We also have a slight risk from about southern Minnesota all the way into about northern Oklahoma there, and we also have a marginal risk all the way from far west central Texas and then into about central Minnesota and western Wisconsin. We also do have a marginal risk in northeastern central to northeastern Pennsylvania, and then into southwestern New York. And then if we look at our tornado risk with this, we have a 5% risk from southern Minnesota all the way into pretty much eastern Kansas there, with a 2% around that from southern Minnesota all the way into about northern Oklahoma. Then for our wind threat, we do have a 30% risk and a 30% hatch risk around the 30% and into parts of the 15%, but our 30% is from about central Iowa all the way to about northwestern Missouri, and then we have that hatch risk from about north central Iowa all the way into northeastern Kansas there, and with a 15% around that, all the way from about southern Minnesota into about northern Oklahoma, and a 5% around that from about south central Minnesota, western Wisconsin, and then into pretty much southeastern South Dakota all the way into western Texas. And then we have that 5% wind risk into Pennsylvania as well as New York, and then also into a little bit of New Jersey right there. And then looking at our hail risk, we do have a 30% and a hatch risk around that, but the 30% is from about central Iowa all the way into northeastern Kansas there. And then around that is a 15% risk from about southern Minnesota all the way into about northern Oklahoma. And then with our hatch risk, it's pretty much it's generally the same area. It's just a little bit shrunken towards that 30%. And then we have a 5% from about central Minnesota all the way into western Texas, and we also have a 5% into north central and northeastern Pennsylvania, western, kind of southwestern, southern New York, and then into far western New Jersey. Now let's look at the 18Z HRRR model for some of these storms today. So really you're going to have some clusters and some probably stronger storms moving into Iowa around in the next hour or two, and then still some mainly weaker thunderstorms and showers into South Dakota there. But then as you go farther into the next couple of hours toward about early evening to mid-evening, you're going to have some intensifying of some of these cells into eastern Nebraska and western Iowa there, and even into southeastern South Dakota and into southern Minnesota as well. And then they really start to try to form, and then you have some of these pretty much supercell looking structures showing up later this evening into Iowa, and then even into Kansas, and then even into Oklahoma. And they move east and form into a line, and this is about late evening, and then the early nighttime hours you're still going to have these storms moving east, mainly over Minnesota, Iowa, northwestern Missouri, and eastern Kansas, and then into some isolated areas of northeastern Oklahoma as well. Still, as they go east, they're going to have that line trying to sort of weakening a little bit, and just generally moving through northern Missouri into western Illinois as well. Very late tonight into early tomorrow. Then you're still going to have some storms moving in throughout the later hours and into early tomorrow throughout Illinois, even possibly Missouri, and then into northern Oklahoma. And then we will talk about tomorrow's storm threat in just a second. Now let's look at our surface-based instability with our surface-based CAPE here. So already showing up around this time right now on the 18Z HRRR, and over the next couple of hours you do have quite a bit of CAPE, surface-based CAPE that is, showing up into eastern Kansas and then into eastern Nebraska there. And you're generally just going to have quite a bit of instability into eastern, pretty much central to eastern Oklahoma, eastern Nebraska, and eastern Kansas as well. And then really, as you go throughout the next several hours, you're still going to have definitely plenty of instability moving into eventually Missouri and then into Kansas and Nebraska there. You're really going to have to watch. You're going to have to watch this too, just for that instability, because we're going to see how these storms take in and use that instability as they strengthen and stuff. Now, looking at our low-level jet on the 18Z HRRR, you do have but a decent amount of winds from in the lower levels, just a mainly 30 knot range into western Iowa, northwestern Missouri, eastern Kansas, and then into far eastern Nebraska. And then really over the next couple of hours, this low-level jet will increase quite a bit, mainly over Iowa, but it will maintain a upper 30 knot range into northern Missouri, eastern Kansas, and then still going farther into later this evening into tonight. That low-level jet will start to ramp up again over northern Missouri and eastern Iowa, mainly in the mid 40 knot range to upper 40 knot range, showing up there into Iowa and Missouri. So watching this for sure, definitely with the overlap of instability and those winds in the lower levels of the atmosphere. Another thing you can look at to get a better understanding of the potential hazards with this with severe weather threats, looking at the 0.3 kilometer CAPE, generally if you have values over 150 joules per kilogram, that's a better sign that storms are going to have the potential to have stronger updrafts near the surface, and you can pretty much just the storms have a better ability at producing tornadoes, and they just have those stronger updrafts near the surface. And what I'm watching a little bit is some of these 0.3 kilometer CAPE values into central and pretty much central Iowa, into even northern Missouri. But you're gonna have to watch and see if these 0.3 kilometer CAPE values can pretty much reach that area of your lower level winds pushing up from the south. And I mean, you have values over 150 joules per kilogram, but I mean, just quickly taking a sounding right here, they didn't, in this sounding, it doesn't show it catching up to some of those storms, which is a good thing for sure. But just quickly taking another sounding right here. This is not a great sounding, but as you can see, I mean, you do have a little bit of 0 to 3 kilometer CAPE, but hopefully it doesn't catch up with these storms in those lower level winds. But it'll definitely be something to watch and monitor for sure. Now, looking at our marginal risk in the northeast, you're going to have some storms forming into New York and Pennsylvania. over the next couple of hours. Some are already ongoing at the moment, but some will strengthen, and you'll have that brief hail risk as well as that wind risk too, mainly over the next couple of hours into tonight. And then as you get later in today, and then the sun starts to set, you lose that daytime heating, and those storms weaken a little bit, but mainly just some scattered showers and storms across Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. Now looking at our day 2 outlook for tomorrow, Wednesday, May the 1st, we have a slight risk all the way from southern Nebraska into about west central Texas, and then all the way into about west central Kansas into far western Oklahoma. You do have an enhanced risk as well, and then around that is a marginal risk all the way from about central Nebraska and into Iowa, all the way down into south central Texas as well. With our tornado risk with this, we have a 5% from central Kansas into about northeast Texas into western Oklahoma. And then with our wind risk, we have two different 15% risk, one into southern Nebraska and northern Kansas, and then a 15% risk into very far southwestern Oklahoma into about west central Texas as well, and a 5% that surrounds those 2% to 15% risk from central Nebraska and then even to Iowa all the way down into Texas again. And then looking at our hail risk, we do have a 30% risk with a hatch around that, but our 30% risk is from about west central Kansas into about northwestern Oklahoma. And then around that is our hatch risk, and this is about from north central Kansas all the way into about western Texas there. And then with our 15% risk is about southern Nebraska all the way into about western central to western Texas again. And then we have a 5% around that from about central Texas. So first we'll look at the central U.S. on the 18Z HRRR. So you have those storms we're going to have tonight over Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa. And then really going to have some of these storms that'll linger into the night, into the late hours tonight, early hours tomorrow into Oklahoma and Kansas. And you still have some clusters and just a kind of jumbled up mess there into northeastern Oklahoma. And then that'll be very early tomorrow morning. And then you're going to have some kind of smaller cells and storms forming into northern Kansas, into southern Nebraska and northwestern Missouri. And then you'll have some storms, but probably mainly showers showing up into western Iowa and then into eastern Nebraska and into eastern Kansas tomorrow. And then you're still having those kind of this jumbled up cluster of storms into northeastern Oklahoma and then to far southwestern Missouri. And then what you're going to have to watch is these storms that start to form into southern Kansas and into western Oklahoma and then into northern Texas as well. Just these storms very capable of producing large hail, and you'll have that wind risk as well, but you can just tell by looking at these will definitely have the chance to produce some very large hail. And you're going to have all these kind of starting out with isolated storms tomorrow evening, and then kind of forming into a line into northern Texas, and then we'll cover Texas in just a moment, southern Texas and central Texas. But into western Oklahoma, you have these clusters and some semi-discrete storms showing up into south central Kansas. And then going into late tomorrow evening into tomorrow night, or later tomorrow night, You're gonna have some more storms. I'm not sure what the 18Z HRRR is trying to show here, but I mean, it's showing some clusters forming up into pretty much northern Kansas into southern Nebraska there, and you're gonna have to watch this too. But still with those lines forming into Oklahoma and Texas, and then they start to move east very late tomorrow on Wednesday, and then still moving east. And we'll talk about this other threat on Thursday as well in just a moment. Now looking at mainly Texas and then part of Oklahoma for tomorrow, you're going to have some storms forming quite a bit earlier, not quite a bit, but at least a couple hours earlier than what they're showing forming in Oklahoma. And you're going to have some smaller cells, and these will probably get quite a bit larger as the day goes on. And then by mid to late evening, you're going to have just numerous storms forming across western Texas. And then there's that one storm forming into Kansas we were just talking about earlier. And then still they form into kind of a jumbled up line, and that's where our wind threat will take place. But still, you're going to have that brief tornado threat as well. And then also just mainly with the hail threat with this and the wind threat, but still moving east into very late tomorrow evening into tomorrow night. And then still as they move east, you have a lot of clusters showing up there over Oklahoma and Texas, and then into central Texas there. And then they form into more of a more defined line very late on Wednesday into early on Thursday, showing up on the 18Z HRRR. Like I was talking about in last night's video, you're going to have that low level jet beginning to ramp up over Texas and Oklahoma, where those storms can form, and then you're really going to have that low level jet going and pretty much strengthening by later tomorrow evening into Texas and into Oklahoma as well. And then still it'll continue to strengthen and probably reach its peak maybe around very late evening into early night, into the early nighttime hours, into about the mid nighttime hours tomorrow into Thursday. And then you're going to have this wide field of ranges in the, you're going to have about a 30 to 40 knot range of your lower level winds there. And then for our moisture with our surface dew points, you're still going to have plenty of moisture surging out of the Gulf. Dew points into the mid and upper 60s across parts of eastern Texas and into Oklahoma. Really, some areas showing up of lower 70s dew points into northern Oklahoma later tomorrow evening. And then really you're still gonna have plenty of moisture for those storms as they move throughout Texas and Oklahoma and into Kansas. And your temperatures are also going to be you're still going to have a bunch of heating, a lot of heating for sure. Temperatures mainly throughout the upper 80s and even to the mid 90s showing up into northern Texas and into western Oklahoma. Temperatures into the mid and lower 90s showing up there. And then really you're going to have peak temperatures probably around the mid to upper 90s in northern Texas, and then into eastern Oklahoma, temperatures in the lower to mid and upper 80s throughout the state. And then still as those storms start to form, you can see them decreasing the temperature where that rain is falling, and really you can just see the temperatures fall as those storms move east. And you're going to have generally mid to upper 70s temperatures, even into the lower 60s across eastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, very late tomorrow night into early on Thursday, showing up on the 18Z HRRR. For day 3 on Thursday, May the 2nd, we do have a marginal risk all the way from western Wisconsin into southeastern Minnesota, all throughout these states into central Texas there. And then with our probabilistic, we do have a 5% in that same area of that marginal risk. On Thursday, on the 12Z GFS, you're going to have a shortwave trough kind of moving through the central US, and then you'll have that chance for some storms mainly across parts of the central US on Thursday. That's going to be it for tonight's this evening's update. I hoped y'all learned something new, and I will try to keep making videos, and I will definitely try to make another video on tomorrow's threat, maybe around this time tomorrow, and then we'll also start to look at Thursday's severe weather threat as well. But I do appreciate all of y'all watching, and I hope everyone has a great evening.